To kick off the scariest month of the year, we are looking at the scariest, most involuntary void-inducing of the available formations, the Assault Lance. So what do units in an Assault Lance share in common? What characteristic ties them together? How do you make an Assault Lance, and more so, how do you make a good Assault Lance? Assault Lances are the heavy wheelstone of the grain mill. They are both ponderous and deadly, grinding their foes beneath their quaking footfalls. They are the terrifying anvil, the immovable object, the last line of defense. Enemies lose their conviction in the face of such reckless abandon and give up ground to these behemoths. So, what makes up an Assault Lance? In the standard variation, an Assault Lance is comprised of at least 3 units that are size 3 or greater. And like the Heavy Battle Lance covered in the prior video, no light units are allowed. All the units in this lance must have a minimum of 5 points of armor in Alpha Strike values. Furthermore, at least 75% of the formation's units must be able to dish out at least 3 damage in the medium range bracket. That should be achievable for most units that fall into this size range anyway. Lastly, an Assault Lance must have at least 1 unit of the Juggernaut role, or 2 units of the Sniper role. Recall in the prior video that I had mentioned the ideal role, the key to ignoring any requirements in a formation. Juggernaut is the ideal role, so if you can have all Juggernauts in your formation, you can skip all the other requirements. What do you get in return for these strict requirements? For meeting these strict requirements, you can pick either the Multitasker special pilot ability or the Demoralizer special pilot ability at the beginning of play. At the beginning of each game turn, up to half the units in the formation get to receive the chosen special pilot ability. So, what are these special pilot abilities? What do they do? Well, I can't speak much on Multitasker, as it is dealt with in the in-house rules we use in my playgroup. We often use the optional rule for multiple attack rolls, so we allow folks to simply declare their targets and how much damage is being applied before making the shot, if all targets are in the same range bracket. If we really feel like it's being abused, we might require that Multitasker special pilot ability be present on the pilot in order to split their fire. But more often than not, we ignore it entirely. What it does under normal conditions with no optional rules is allow the mech to split its damage evenly between 2 targets, rounding down with a minimum of 1. There are also some complications for dealing with multiple ranges. Really, the main benefit of this ability is just the removal of the +1 modifier to the attack roll against a second target in my playgroup. We do need to talk about the damage split though. Say you stuck to the minimum requirements and your guys do 3 damage. Or pick any odd number really, and you'll see why this SPA isn't great. So your 3 points of damage is rounded down to 1 point against each target, and you only get a split between 2 targets. Or your 5 points of damage might be rounded down to 2 on each target. So there's a very narrow subset of units that actually benefit from this SPA. Units that deal damage in even amounts, or units that want to split fire between targets at different ranges, which this ability allows you to do. But there's also one last unit that might benefit. It won't win you any friends, and it would be very hard to find one that fits the requirements of the lance. But theoretically, if you can find a unit that meets the requirements but deals 0 asterisk damage, you can actually cheat the system a little bit to deal a minimum of 1 damage to 2 units, which is a large boost in effectiveness. Very niche, definitely cheesy, sounds like something a Blakeist would do, and I might have misinterpreted this rule. Furthermore, it might just get errated out at some point. But as far as I can tell, it's legit. Gross. That leaves us with the special pilot ability of Demoralizer, which can do the following. Taken from the latest errata I could find. During the combat phase, the player may select 1 enemy unit within line of sight and within medium range of this unit to try and intimidate. The Demoralizer unit must make a 2d6 roll with a target number of 8 plus the demoralizer's skill, minus the demoralizer's size. Success will intimidate the target. Units that are intimidated in this fashion subtract 2 inches from their movement and 1 from their TMM, to a minimum of 2 movement and 0 TMM, and suffer a +1 target number modifier for all attacks made against the intimidating unit. The intimidation takes effect in the end phase of this turn and lasts through the end phase of the next turn. Okay, so that's a lot of rules. A lot of rules for a moderate bonus. On one hand, it makes the unfortunate target of this ability easier to hit, it is a medium range ability, and it makes the target slower to boot. This is in addition to making your Assault Lance member harder to hit, but realistically, unless you're limiting the target selection of this particular unit anyway, they will just pick something else to shoot at. It also only works on half the units in your formation. The erratas to this ability really made it useful. Before the erratas, in my 2019 edition, it was only good out to 12 inches. That was awful. Now you can pick somebody up to 24 inches away. That is a huge difference and makes this skill much more useful. So comparing it to Multitasker, we do have to make some rolls, but if successful, we get a bonus to all shooting against that target thanks to the reduction in TMM, if it had a TMM. That would influence your selection of targets for this ability. Pick ones that are fast and you need to slow down. Not only that, but you force the target to make a choice of suffering the penalty when returning fire or target something else entirely. This might help if you can tell a gang up is coming, because you can pick the most dangerous of the pack and hamstring it with the target modifier. Bottom line is that Demoralizer will likely always have a chance to be useful, whereas Multitasker will always be simpler. For me, I'd be picking the former over the latter every time. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, what about variants? Well, the Assault Lance only has one. The Fast Assault Lance has all the same requirements as a regular Assault Lance, but has the added stipulation of requiring all units in the formation to have a minimum movement value of 10 inches, or they need to possess jump capabilities. The amount of jump distance doesn't matter, any jump distance qualifies. Highlanders rejoice. In return, you get the regular benefits of the Assault Lance, plus the added benefit of receiving the Stand Aside special rule for 2 units in the formation each turn. You can stack this with the units receiving the other SPA from the formation bonus. What Stand Aside does is allow the owner to move through enemy units at an additional movement cost. Although non-damaging, it lets you circumvent the anti-stacking rule that would normally cause hostile units to block your movement. Very handy for pushing onto objectives or getting out of a tight spot. If you play varied scenarios, this can win you games. Let none block your path. So how can we maximize this formation? The requirements are pretty tight, so there isn't as much wiggle room as a Battle Lance. We want to pick units that are good, medium-range fighters to make the most use of the Demoralizer SPA. If you like the Multitasker ability instead, I wouldn't know how to plan for that, just enjoy your simpler split fire. My only recommendation would be sticking to units that have even numbers of damage so that it's an even split when splitting your damage. If possible, I would also limit my selections to those heavies or assault mechs with jump capability. Any amount works, it all qualifies you for the Stand Aside SPA, which can be really clutch in some games. Most of the finesse of this formation comes in how you play it. I would take turns cycling units in and out of cover, forcing hard choices for the opponent. With half your lance able to demoralize a couple targets, you can force them to choose to shoot at the demoralizer at a reduced chance, or keep trying their luck against units in cover. Or perhaps they'll shoot something else entirely. If you are cognizant of what units you have exposed, you can restrict the amount of freedom your opponent has. Alternatively, you can use it to ping fast-moving targets and make them easier to take down. +4 TMM hovercraft, bringing that down to a 3+ TMM can make a huge difference. A lot of heavier units can lose their TMM entirely by targeting them with this ability. Each time you reduce the target number, it is a huge force multiplier for all the units shooting at that target. There's a lot of high-level play at work here, which is good. I used to be very lukewarm to the Assault Lance, but after seeing the errata, I'm a lot more optimistic. I might even try and take this lance sometime. If I did, I would probably put something together like this. a Crockett CRK-5003-1, an Emperor EMP-6A, HGN-733, and a Pillager PLG-3Z. All the mechs in this lance have full jump capability, giving them the stand-aside special in addition to the normal benefits. They are not as expensive as a lance of this type could be, but that is probably due to their more moderate damage output. With their jump jets, however, I would use these to leap in and out of cover, doing my best to never expose more than half the unit at a time in order to maximize their use of the Demoralizer special pilot ability. Ideally, I would want to coordinate with a different formation, like a medium battle lance, to double down on the force multipliers, combining the demoralized TMM reduction with the lucky SPA rolls to maximize my damage. Today's a very special day, and I'd like to thank our very first Patreon supporter, Derek Burge. How would you use this lance? Do you have any favorite units you would like to include? What is the most expensive unit you can drop in this formation? Leave a comment below and let's all learn from each other. If you found this video helpful, you can help me out in return by doing all the algorithm make happy things. Patreon supporters enable me to keep doing what I'm doing, so thank you very much. If you'd like to see behind the scenes content or previews of my upcoming content, take a look at the link provided in the description below. Until next time, the battle will continue.